We're back with one of my heroes, one of the most influential musicians and producers of our time, Brian Eno. Before the break, we were talking about the Windows startup sound and how you were commissioned to do that for the first version of Windows 95. Windows or Mac did you use?
Mac. I've only ever used Mac.
Really?
Yeah.
And do you, what does your studio look like? You use Pro Tools? What kinds of software do you use?
I don't use Pro Tools. I use Logic.
Is it possible? I mean, synthesizers and computers are so infinite in capacity. Is it possible to have, as we were talking about before the break, a kind of a cultural history of a synthesizer as a violin or a guitar does?
Well, it's starting to happen now. You might have noticed that a lot of records now deliberately incorporate early,
yes,
unreliable synthesizer sounds.
Right.
And in fact, something that has happened recently in synthesizers is that they've deliberately started producing lower quality sounds to mimic the sounds of early synthesizers. So I think there is a real vocabulary now building up with the synthesizer.
Are you using older analog synthesizers or the newer synthesizers? Or both?
I use mostly what was actually the most successful synthesizer ever built, which is the DX7. And I'm probably one of the few people on the planet who ever learned how to program it. I had a particularly boring 6 months in my life where I had nothing much else to do.
How do you program it?
It's not very well designed. In fact, I remember speaking to Yamaha about it, and they said, well, 80% of the instruments we get back for servicing have never been reprogrammed. People have just used the factory sounds.
Yeah.
And they thought that was a user failure. You know, I said
very
it's not.
Common in the computer industry.
Yeah, it's a design failure.
Yeah.
If you haven't made it easy enough or attractive enough for people to reprogram it, you've designed it wrongly.
Right.
But there has been, until recently, there has been that kind of attitude among designers about instruments that it's up to the user to somehow accommodate the designer.
Have you designed your own? Would you like to design your own?
I've built a number of strange instruments, actually. I built a thing called the coloring box, which was a way of creating very complex formant structures on sounds, because one of the things that I found interesting about synthesizers is that they don't have bodies. They're disembodied instruments. Actually, the body of a synthesizer is the loudspeaker. That's that's the first time the sound becomes physical.
There's no sounding board, no frets, no strings, no...
That's right. And one of the characteristics of real instruments is that they have a lot of constant information as a result of their physicality. So I built this thing called the coloring box, which was basically a grid of loudspeakers with plumbing tubes sitting on top, which I could change the length of. And I could switch the speakers in or out of phase, so I could either peak or reduce at certain frequencies. It looked beautiful.
It's like an electronic pipe organ almost.
Yes, exactly.
Like.
Yeah.
What are you doing now? Can you talk about the one you're working on now?
I'm not actually building an instrument at the moment. I've been thinking about a synthesizer for some time. In fact, I was thinking about it with Danny Hillis, who's one of the other members of the Long Now Foundation, and a very good inventor himself. The difficulty with synthesizer design is that the more options you present, the harder it is to ever learn to program it. So designers deliberately restrict their options hugely because they know they're going to make an unprogrammable synthesizer otherwise. So my feeling was that, what about having a synthesizer where you just hit a button called go and it produces 32 random sounds?
And that's your palette?
Using all of the possibilities, every known synthesis possibility. Then you listen to those and you think, I like that one. You hit that one and it evolves 32 versions of that, mutations of it. You go through them, I like this one.
Wow.
I'll say that again.
I love that.
You go through, I like this one.
I love that.
And so you can hone in on a sound area without ever knowing how it's done. You could then have fine tuning so that you can actually physically tune it. So I've been thinking about something like that. So if anyone would like to...
I bet you there's people writing it right now.
I hope there are people out there who will say to me, Brian, I've been trying to get someone interested in this idea for years.
So I'm hearing two things. One is that limits are good. Too many possibilities. For instance, in the studies, the bell studies for the Clock of the Long Now, really one sound. I mean, it's bells.
Yeah.
You know, no violins. It's all bells. And so working within those limits is a challenge. And yet at the same time, you like serendipity. You like a little bit of chance in there as well. Is that how you work?
Like real instruments, actually. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, every violin is different, every
Right.
piano is different, but
Right.
but you would have no trouble recognizing each of them immediately.
Right.
So yes, I like the I like interesting small changes in texture, actually.
I wish we had more time to talk. It's been a great pleasure having you on. If you want to know more, longnow.org is the website for the Clock of the Long Now. And they do offer this CD, which is a benefit for the clock.
Yeah.
Bell Studies for the Clock of the Long Now. And of course, Brian Eno also sells his own unreleased music on his website. It's Shopino.
It's called Eno Shop.
EnoShop.co.uk. You know, iTunes Music Store has none of your albums on there. Why is that?
I don't know.
It's the label, not you, right?
You should complain.
I have complained bitterly. We'll have more screensavers coming up. Nothing has been untouched by the hand of Brian Eno as a producer, as a musician, as an innovator, as an artist. From Roxy Music to his solo career and production collaborations with David Bowie, U2, Talking Heads, his art continues to evolve, and we're so thrilled to have him in studio with us today on the Screensavers. You're here in town working on the Clock of the Long Now. You're going to be participating. What is the Clock of the Long Now?
Well, the Long Now Foundation is a group of people who are trying to encourage some kind of commitment to very long-term thinking. So we think we're trying to counterbalance a trend to increasingly short-term thinking, both in government, industry, and society in general, and to try to encourage people to start to think of very distant futures.
How distant?
10,000 years.
So the clock will live for 10,000 years and
Yes.
ring, what, every century?
Well, there are various theories about that. One of the theories which I explore on this record is for it to ring every day, actually, but with a unique peal each day.
Each time something different.
Yes.
The CD is called Bell Studies for the Clock of the Long Now, and it's studies
Yeah.
with bells and bell-like things. Have you settled yet on what you want it to sound like?
No.
It's a hard thing to say, to choose what it's going to peal 10,000 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
Does that seem significant, very significant? Is it a difficult?
Well, like the clock itself, this is really a way of getting you to think about long futures. So as soon as you say to someone, we're trying to build a clock that will last 10,000 years, they say, yeah, but there might be earthquakes, there might be revolutions, there might be dark ages. And you say, yes, there might be all those things, and now you're thinking about the future.
Right.
So the fact of actually doing something, trying to do something that addresses this problem, is exactly the kind of engagement that we would hope to make.
Do you think the short-term thinking is particularly an American problem, or is it a global issue?
No, not
these
particularly an
days?
American problem, no.
We are very short-term focused, though, aren't we?
I think it's an increasing problem of capitalistic societies.
Yeah.
So if it is a problem here, or if it's more of a problem here, it's just because you're a bit further ahead in a process that we're pretty much all taking part in, I think.
Yeah. You were very early to use electronic instruments and to use technology in music. In fact, you came to music as a painter. Mm-hmm. Was technology helpful to you in that respect?
Absolutely central. I couldn't have been a musician without studio technology. I can only be a musician because of recording studios. I don't play any instruments well enough to fool anybody for more than a minute or so. So my making music has always been based around the possibilities of, well, it used to be tape recording, but
Right.
now it's use of computers. So I've always approached music as a painter, really, of somebody who's putting this sound next to this one and making this one a bit bigger and changing the color of that one.
You're constructing the music.
Yes, I'm constructing it. It's very much studio constructed. In fact, very little of the music I've released has ever had any live existence, if you understand what I mean.
It's not performed.
It's never been performed. It's only ever been made. It's never, ever existed aside from on those records.
Some people say, well, an acoustic instrument, a real instrument, is human, and machine music is not human. You don't feel that way?
I sympathize quite a lot with that argument, and I'll tell you why people consistently keep getting good results from old instruments, which apparently seem very limited. You know, a violin has 4 strings. What can you do with 4 strings when you could have a synthesizer with thousands of different sounds? Well, what you can do with a violin is you can have a rapport with it. It's a highly evolved instrument. People have been playing them for a very long time, So you don't ever just hear a violin, you hear the history of violins and the history of violin playing. The power of new instruments, of course, is that they're new, that they can make sounds that you've never heard before. They can make new worlds, basically.
You created the Windows 95 startup sound, is that not right?
Yes.
You did? So Microsoft came to you and said, would you make some sounds for us?
Yes. Well, it wasn't Microsoft, it was an agency working for Microsoft.
Well,
They-
that must have been an unusual challenge for you. What did
it
you
was
think
particularly unusual because at that time I had been working mostly on pieces of music that were very, very long
Right.
and very empty.
about music for airports, things like
Yes,
that?
but even more empty than that. And I got this letter one day and it said, could you make us a piece of music that is exciting, innovative, creative, original, daring, bold, new, fresh, inspiring? There's a list of 39 adjectives. And then it said, and 3.5 seconds long.
Well, you did. I mean, it's a good startup sound.
It was really an interesting project. 'Cause it was
it's
like trying to make a tiny jewel, you know.
Right. Well, it's analogous to the problem that icon designers have to put
Yes.
to pack something into a very small
Yeah.
resolution. Do you feel it was a success, the Windows startup sound?
Yes, I mean, it's my most widely disseminated piece of music.
Oh, now I don't know. Would you like that
I
on
should
your
imagine it is.
tombstone? Created the Windows startup sound.
I'd like the sound on my tombstone.
All right. We're going to take a break. When we come back, I want to ask Brian Eno how he creates music these days, because it's very different from how you might imagine. Stick around. More with Brian Eno as Screensavers continues.